Welcome to another edition of The Need for Courage. I'm your host today, John Byrne with the Center for Peacemaking at Marquette University, and really excited today. We're very honored to have the 25th President of Marquette University, Kimo Ah Yun, with us today. And first, Kimo, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And, the center really appreciates your support over the years. And obviously, we're trying to establish conversations with people like yourself to continue to advocate for peace studies and peacemaking, how important that is, especially in this environment that we're in today. So thanks for taking some time today.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. But yeah, we're grateful at Marquette to be able to have the Center for Peacemaking. You think about as a Catholic Jesuit university, and especially as a Catholic university,
Right.
What are we called to do? How are we called to do that work? And the Center for Peacemaking promotes everything that we are about.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about your career. So a couple things that are fascinating and really something that I think will help encourage others. You were your first generation college graduate in your family.
Yeah.
How was that? How was that possible? Talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about the non-traditional paths that you took to get where you are today. But first of all, being the first generation college graduate, that must have been both very encouraging to the remaining parts of your family, but talk a bit about that.
Yeah, and I talk about many ways. I'm an accidental college graduate. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. I have four sisters. Two did not graduate from high school, and the others did not go to college. I was just fortunate to be able to be put in a position that I ended up being around other people that valued education when I was in high school.
Right.
And then along my life, finding mentors that helped me. But for those two things, I don't end up where I'm at.
So talk about the non-traditional part of it. So you did get your college degree. And obviously you have several advanced degrees.
Yeah.
How did all of that prepare you for where you are today? But also maybe walk us through some of those steps in your career.
Yeah, and I'd first start more generally. I talk about as a first generation student and how you kind of move forward in a non-traditional way and end up where you're at. I talk about the 3 Gs. The first of those is, I think, first generation students, when you understand that you come from little, oftentimes gratitude. And so that gratitude about having things that I did not have before, other people did not have. I'm just grateful every day. I'm grateful to be able to come to work and be at Marquette and make the difference. The second G is generosity. And generosity in that if you don't have mentors, you're not going to end up where you're at. So you have to be generous because someone was generous to allow you to get where you're at. And then the last one is grit. It's about hard work. Show up and do the work. There aren't excuses. I think about my parents where, even though they might not have felt well or they were sick, you still got up and you went to work and you did your job. You have to have that grit to get through it. So when you have that, it helps you to move kind of forward. My pathway and my journey was, accidental. End up at undergraduate and then was successful. And someone at some point told me I should go to graduate school. I ended up in a master's program at Kansas State University because it was the most different place in my mind growing up in California I could live in. I met a mentor there, Bill Shank-Hamlin, who to this day, I thank him for helping me to understand what it means to be a professional in higher education. That led me eventually to Michigan State, where I did my PhD, and that gave me all the tools to go back and be a college professor. And when you, part of a working family, my dad laid carpet for a living. My mom picked tomatoes, worked in kitchens, just did everything. I saw how hard they worked. Being at a university, that works a lot easier, and never look back. Was able to teach and be a faculty member for 20 plus years, be part of the lives of students. And that led me just to, take on other responsibilities and eventually ended up at Marquette and in this role.
How has, you talk a lot when I've seen some of your presentations and speeches, you talk a lot about faith and how faith drives you.
Yeah.
How has faith been a part of all this, both your journey and the success you've had here at Marquette?
Yeah. Again, this is another thing that I say, some people are just fortunate. I was fortunate that I grew up in a family where the Catholic Church was important. And so we, went to church regularly, and it instilled in me this understanding of a kind of core responsibility that you have to the world. But for that, I don't think I end up where I'm at, or I have the values that I have today. And I talk about my favorite verse in the Bible is in John chapter 13, verses 34, 35. Love others as I have loved you. And so if we start from that place of just loving other people, then everything kind of falls into place because we do things for the right reason.
So you were in Kansas State and Michigan State, so you obviously you were able to navigate coming from being a native Californian to be in these other locations. So those two jumps in your career and then coming to Marquette, talk a bit about that, because again, you didn't go back to California. You've been at other places and been successful there. How has that navigation worked? Because I think in general speaking, certainly when I was here many years ago, we didn't get a lot of folks from the West Coast.
Yeah.
We got them obviously from the Chicago area. When I was here, a lot of folks from New York, where I came from. But being a West Coast person initially, now again, you've jumped places until you got here. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, and actually I went from Michigan State, then I went back to California.
Okay.
And I was a professor there for 20 years.
Yeah.
I thought I'd never leave
You wouldn't going to
California.
leave, yeah.
When Marquette was looking for the dean of the District College of Communication, the search firm called me and said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you or talk to you about this position." And I said, "I'm good."
Right.
I said, "I live in California. Marquette, great institution, but that's in Milwaukee. Until you could change that fact, I'm not interested." Kind of hung up, and I chuckled, and I thought, I did my time in the Midwest. But they called back a week later. I had a chance to talk to them. Still was not convinced that I would end up taking the position here. I thought that they were wasting their time. I made a visit out to Marquette, and you feel the special energy of Marquette. And then I met President Mike Lovell in my very last interview. And it's a time where I was able to say, this is someone I think I could learn a lot from. But more importantly, his vision about how a university should be integrated in a city, and his vision of thinking about our need to be able to care for and develop and transform the lives of students is exactly what I believed in. So I loaded up the family. My kids were going into 9th, 8th, and 4th grade. Even at that age, they told me, "Dad, people move from Milwaukee to California, not the other way."
Right.
But we did it, and it turned out just to be a great experience eventually for them. It took a while as they adapted and found their new friend groups. I'm fortunate to say one of them is a graduate of Marquette now. The other one just finished her first year at Marquette. So it's just been a tremendous blessing for our family.
You mentioned Dr. Lovell's commitment to the local community and how he's ratcheted up Marquette's involvement. Marquette's always been somewhat involved in Milwaukee, but he really took it to a new level, and that appealed to you. How are you taking what he started and advancing that?
Yeah, and I would say as part of that is just making sure I'm continuing the work. And so, our commitment to the Near West Side Partners is strong. Scaling wellness in Milwaukee, I continue to serve on that. I recently joined the board of Children's. So how do we engage Marquette to Children's Hospital? It's all about continuing to figure out where are the opportunities. Serve on the GMC, the Greater Milwaukee Committee as well.
Right.
And we all want Milwaukee and Southeast Wisconsin to be successful. And we all want to see it grow in ways that benefits the people who come and live here. So, part of it advancing is just being engaged in the city and continuing to hear what role can Marquette play to be able to help the city of Milwaukee to be even better. And we do that through our students,
right?
Primarily, but we do it through our faculty and staff as well. But we transform, develop students, and then find ways to be able to keep them here so that they can be part of the fabric of this community.
That's great. And that leads me to another point that's relevant to that, and that is the service hours that Marquette students compete. It's one of the highest levels of engagement in the country. And how important is that? Obviously, you've set the role. Dr. Lovell began that process, but the service hours that students do here, that's pretty incredible, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we've been fortunate the last 2 years. Marquette students has been ranked the #1 student body in the country of
Right.
all universities for engaging in service to the community. And that goes back to being part of, the core missions. The Jesuits were founded on being able to serve others. Jesuit universities in the United States were founded on figuring out how to locate them, mostly in cities, so they can serve the communities in which they are.
Right.
That is one of the unique things about Marquette around the country in terms of universities. We are the only Catholic Jesuit university in a city that has disparities, that has needs. And it means that our students' education can be in part connected to the things that are happening around them so that they can walk in partnership with others, to be men and women for and with others by giving their time, giving their grace, giving their love. And when they give those things, they can help to lift a community.
The Center for Peacemaking is just one part of that, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
a lot of parts of the university are doing those service hours and those things. So in addition to the Center for Peacemaking, talk a bit about that, but what are some of the other parts of the university? Because obviously these students are coming from all aspects of
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
There's no question. Talk a bit about that, because I think that adds to the volume of student engagement that you've talked about.
Yeah, it's at a lot of different levels. In the law school, we
Mhm.
run a legal clinic, so people who might not otherwise have access can have access to understand their legal rights and responsibilities. In our dental school, we run a mobile clinic where our students are in about 90% of the counties in the state of Wisconsin every
Mhm.
year, providing dental care. And as we know, as dental care is a kind of a precursor to your entire physical health.
Right.
So when there are challenges there, it runs much deeper to everyday activities, things like Midnight Run, where our students are going into the community weekly and working in food pantries and food lines and serve in homeless shelters, being able to serve others. So, you know, our nursing students who are also
Mhm.
they go out and they give vaccinations and they help the community be able to get care for others. So they're doing this work while they're in school, which helps to form the person that they are. So when they graduate and do that work, they understand there's a purpose, a higher purpose for doing that job.
When you are asked to talk to potential students about Marquette and all that it offers, besides what we've already talked about, what are some of the key things? Besides it being obviously a Jesuit university and all the things that you've talked about, what are some of the other areas that people look up and say, I had this on my list, I really wasn't sure, but what you've talked about and what others have talked about is going to get me there? Because obviously the enrollment or application rate has
Yeah.
certainly risen, even now when it's difficult financially for students to go to college. So talk a bit about that.
Yeah, my message to families when they come in is think carefully about Marquette and whether or not this is the right place.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, thousands and thousands of universities around this country that people can go to. And every
Sure.
university at some point has a job to be able to give you a degree, to give you to expertise in some particular area so that you can go out and pursue some sort of career for the rest of your life. And I say, if that's your sole purpose, that Marquette's probably not the reason why you shouldn't go to Marquette. What I say is Marquette does those things, but the larger thing is when we do our job well, Marquette helps to give people purpose, give our students purpose, to help them define their compass, their ethical compass, their moral guide. And that leads them to have a productive life. So generally, it's about building character. And in our theology course, there is a book that we use, Who Will You Become? And written by two faculty members, Father Ryan Duns and Connor Kelly from theology. And the book is premised around kind of three ideas. What do you value? How are you going to live those values? And who are you called to become? And that means we have a purpose-filled life. So at the highest level, it's thinking about building a person with purpose. Now, beyond that, I think it's about activities and about majors. And so, we just have really strong programs that
Right.
are ranked and highly regarded. We have tremendous spaces, our Wellness and Rec Center, which is the bringing together of mind, body, and spirit together, taking away any stigma of getting help to be healthy. So whether or not you want to work out to improve your muscles, or you want to go and see a counselor because you're struggling with someone, or you want to go and see a doctor because you have some sort of illness, the idea is here's a single place you come to take care of everything you need. And when we give people those tools in life, they're going to carry it with them forever. So they'll graduate when they're 21 or 22 years old. And when they live to be, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, that they've learned something in those 4 years that allows them to continue to be productive.
The phrase "be the difference" just says so much, obviously. And obviously, you and the leadership team do that. I was here when Father Rayner was president, and he's now this library where we sit is named after him. Dr. Lovell was the first layperson president. You're now the second and the first person of color to run this university. How does that impact your short-term and long-term goals here as president of the university?
Yeah, so I take this in two ways. The first thing is I would say is, regardless of lay or not lay, diverse, not diverse, most important thing is focusing on our mission and focusing on doing what's right and being able to care for the world. So I would say is that part of the job is colorblind, and it has been for 150 years because it's just a tremendous mission. Where I think about it as kind of something that's inspirational, and I didn't think about this always, but I run into community members and I run into students who see someone who looks more like them or has a background more like them, which gives them the belief that they can be more than what they otherwise thought they could be. So if in some way in this position I can serve as an inspiration for anyone, or a modicum of hope that they might have about where they become, in that way, I find it to be gratifying, and I'm hopeful it's successful in that way.
We didn't talk about this pre-conversation, but given all the challenges that universities have today, there's technology challenges like artificial intelligence, obviously, that people are grappling with. The Pope came out with an encyclical. We're actually going to interview Michael Murphy from Loyola in a couple of weeks because he helped work on that encyclical regarding AI, which basically, and I'm obviously clearly paraphrasing, we need guardrails. Whatever happens can be some positive. But given that and some of the other challenges that students that are considering Marquette have, or any university, what major should I have? Where could I get? What's the job market like? As president of a university that's dealing with all those challenges, you obviously have a lot of folks that you rely on. You meet with people and all that. What are some of the biggest challenges for a university to keep what you've been doing so successfully, given all the challenges in the environment today, in the economy, globally, and all those things?
Yeah, I would say is obviously it challenges the cost of higher education. And so, we continue to raise scholarship dollars so we can make it as affordable as possible for our students. But it's a balance where we're balancing societal needs and societal pressures versus who we are. We're going to stay focused on and lean into we're a Catholic Jesuit university founded upon this idea of creating a particular type of person who knows how to think, who knows how to feel, who knows how to be part of their community. And so keeping the human, right, a piece of that, the Pope would talk about being humane in technology. So it's a balance. It's AI is not going to go away. And AI will open up new routes and it'll close other ones. Right. The AJCU, the Catholic Jesuit Universities Consortium, have talked about there's a responsibility for Jesuit universities to lead the way in AI, because it's not about whether or not it can do things, but should it do those things? And how do we make sure that we use it for the good of humanity? And how do we use it to make sure it drives what we want to see as a just world?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We started the conversation with mentorship and working with others. Your comments to the alumni, and I'll give you just a brief, quick little comment that resonated with me almost 50 years later. The first person I met when I moved to Washington, D.C. was a Marquette grad who worked on Capitol Hill. And I went to talk to him, and he spent an hour with me, which he didn't have. And at the end of it, he said, we don't really have any positions for you, but here's 4 or 5 names of people. And he said, just do me a favor. Whatever you do in life, do that. If you talk to somebody about a job, they don't always have to be Marquette alums, but that helps. And I've passed that on to different groups that I've interacted with, but that so resonated with me such a long time ago. But I think that tells you that something you already know. The alumni network is fabulous, not just from a financial standpoint, but the connection to Marquette has always been there. Talk a bit about that, your interaction with alumni over the years.
Yeah, my interaction is strong. So just last week, Dan Jaffe made a transformational gift to our mentors program, which is endowed it and allows us to substantially increase the number of students who can participate in it. And they're paired with alumni, Marquette alumni, and they spend intensive, time, usually a year, sometimes longer together. This is that example of the alumni giving back and wanting to give back. So, there are more alumni who want to participate in than we have available spaces, but it's that people believe that they have this obligation. And I've not seen as strong as a deep commitment to truly caring for students that I have seen at Marquette than any other university that I've ever been connected to. It's special.
That's great to hear. Thank you for taking the time. I'll get you out of here on this. You gave us the 3 Gs early on. What's another takeaway for not just the Marquette community, but the peacemaking community writ large from your perspective and your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the large takeaway is just understanding that there's a higher calling, and understanding that higher calling is we are supposed to be connected to one another and help others. This is where I go back to where I talk about loving one another.
Right.
Like, lean into that. And when we do lean into that love, not expecting anything in return, but truly because we are called to do that. And if we can all embrace that way of thinking and being and feeling, we're going to be okay.
President Kimo, thank you so much for your time and your leadership. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.